and then became a career as a writer. R.K. Narayan wrote volumes of stories and a volume of tales from the legends of India. He married Rajam in Coimbatore in the year 1934. After close security of his work novels, many women characters bear a close resemblance with his wife and her personality. The novels and Friends, written in 1935, The Bachelor of Arts, written in 1937, The Dark Room, written in 1938, brought fame to the writer. He lost, unfortunately, his wife in the year 1939. He lost, unfortunately, his wife in the year 1939. Graham Greene, a famous British writer, was a close friend of R.K. Narayan. And R.K. Narayan, after losing, suggesting his emotions, the world appears very vacant and vague now, and I too feel for the next 6 years, he did not write any novel, but 3 volumes of short stories, Malgudi Days in 1941 and others. The English Teacher was published in 1945 and followed by a series of literary productions for Mr. Sampath in 1949, The Financial Expert written in 1952, Waiting for Mahatma written in 1955, and The Guide, prescribed novel Guide in 1958. His last novel was A Tiger for Malgudi, written in 1983. Though he was literally active even at the age of 77, but literary contribution was considerably less. The Guide received the prescribed novel for you, The Guide, received the Sahitya Academy Award in the year 1960. In the year 1960, the novel also produced a film, was conferred honorary doctorate by University of Leeds, London in the year 1967. He achieved a rare distinction by securing place in Writers and their series published by the British Council. His popularity he is placed next to William Faulkner and Graham America. Narayan writes chiefly about the Indian middle class because he belongs to this class and it is the class he understands best. In Narayan, there is instinct for storytelling as a starting form. In his works of art, the story is built around sharpness of sight, free play of imagination, curiosity and expressiveness, attention to minute detail is another quality writing. R.K. Narayan had a strong bias for reading books and magazines. He began writing under the influence of events in his immediate surroundings. He studied a book called Oliver manuscripts and later on engaged himself in sending the manuscripts to London, hoping that his manuscripts would be accepted It is the idea of becoming a lecturer and later on away from his aspiration because there was an argument with his friend and that master in arts sure way to lose interest in literature. R.K. Narayan was clear that the Indian sensibility was profoundly different from the Western world, and his novels, although they were to be written in English, something which he did it naturally, he brought in another view of the world, other feelings and responses. Humor is his sport, and that for too, ripplingly humorous incidents reckon his works of art, his fiction, by using such components makes it fresh and refreshing. His works of art can be described in terms of monkey of God, wisdom, and benevolence. And benevolence. Why the peacock pecking away at every ant that came within range of its vision in the image of alert, undused and marking eye, marking eye. Now we are discussing chapter wise. Chapter wise. First we discussing chapter 1. First discussing chapter 1. A man approaches Raju. A man approaches Raju. Raju is the protagonist of this novel. He is the hero of the novel, the guide. So a man approaches Raju in the lonely temple ruins and he welcomes him. Raju asks him to sit down, across legged on a granite slab, as if it were thrown. It is evening, and the birds are rustling near the river. The man responds to some of Raju's companionable questions. Raju thinks to himself how he likes this rambling because he has been alone here today. He strokes his chin and also thinks about how his last shave was 2 days ago and he paid for it with his money from jail. The barber could tell he was just out and told Raju as he saved his face that he put his business here for a reason. The barber could also tell Raju did not do anything too bad and asked what he will do next. Raju thoughtfully said he doesn't know. The villager looks up reverentially at Raju as he sits on the higher step. Raju wishes he could blurt out that he is not holy and is only here because he wants to make sure people don't recognize him. As he is about to try and say he is not as great as the man imagines, the man states that he has a problem. Immediately, Raju's old guide vitality comes back and he asks the man to tell him about it. Back in the day, tourists always sought Raju out. It was in his nature to get involved in other people's interests and activities. But later stage, Raju will narrate his own story to this man, who is named Velan. He'll tell him that his trouble started with Rosie. Interestingly, she called herself that is odd because she is just an Indian, not a foreigner. She is a dancer and an orthodox one at that. Raju always used to praise her dancing. She was married to Marco, a grown man. From the moment Raju saw him like a perpetual tourist, he knew that this man was perfect for a guide like himself. Why did Raju become a guide? Very important thing. Seems like it was fated. The railway was in his life from a young age. His parents' house was near the Malgudi railway station, and his father had built it long before trains were even thought of. His father had a small shop known as the Earth Shop. Raju worked there often. Raju's father taught him the Tamil alphabet and disciplined him if he messed up. Raju also learned arithmetic. Being confined to his father's company for hours was difficult, but eventually his father went to the shop and he was able to play at the tamarind tree with his marbles, a hoop, and rubber ball. Sometimes his father took Raju to town when he went shopping, and there Raju marveled at the panorama of life he saw there. He drowsily watched the activities of the marketplace. The man interrupts Raju's reveries and says he has a problem. Raju states that everyone does. He feels confident that he appears saintly. The man tells Raju his name is Velan and his father's lost wife's daughter lives with them. The girl shows no gratitude for all the things he has given her, and she does not want to accept the plans for her marriage. She ran away and Velan had to search for her and bring her back. Now she sulks in her room all day. He asks Raju what to do. Raju tells Velan to bring the girl to him. Velan is grateful and tries to touch Raju's feet, but Raju says it is not permitted. He is feeling more and more saintly. That evening, Raju watches the river and listens to the rustling of the trees. He cannot sleep and decides to count the stars, especially as people will be impressed when he can tell them how many there are. He loses count too and falls asleep. The next morning, Villain brings his half sister. Raju is flustered and wants to be alone for his morning ablutions, so he makes them wait. When he reemerges, he sees the food and drink the visitors have brought him. He is unhappy, having learned to accept any opportunity for food. Raju begins to feel like these adorations of him is right and normal. He tells the story of Devaka, a man from ancient times, but he cannot remember the end. He lapses into silence. Well, he is not perturbed. He is a perfect disciple. Raju's thoughts go back to his mother and her stories. She would tell them for his father to come home at night. He would staying out late with his friends and visitors, discussing litigation and prices of grain and rainfall and more. He ignored food and sleep and would tell Raju when he came to get him to just set some food and make aside. Raju would then run back home, but he had to go through a dark patch that always gave him a cold sweat and sweat and made him think of wild animals, of supernatural beings. His mother would sit with him once inside, and his presence was comforting. He would ask for a story, and she would commence telling one. Back in the present moment, Raju feels a sense of irritation because I'd rather think of his own problems. He tells Velan he cannot think of his problems right now, but will do so when the time is right. Velan does not protest and stands humbly to leave. Somewhat mollified, Raju asks if this is sister. Velan assents. Raju says that with time he will have a solution. Time is needed for the proper understanding. He is proud of his words. So he asks himself, though, if he has been in prison or some transmigration. Raju looks at the girl and says, what must happen will happen. So Velan and his sister cross the river and Raju watches them to go. It is about the first chapter. In second chapter, there is a deal of activity in front of Raju's childhood home, and the family soon learns the trains are coming. A mountain of dirt rises and trucks are busy all day. Raju loves the exciting changes, the talk of the workers, and the special metal objects he finds and treasures. He does not like other boys coming near what he sees as his domain and curses one. His father reprimands him and says he must go to school. Raju is terribly depressed to be taken from his kingdom. He has no choice, though and his father enjoys bragging to others that his son is being educated. It's a long walk to the school and Raju is almost always late. He should go to Albert Mission School, which is closer, but his father tried to convert students to Christianity there. So Raju School is a Payal school, a corporation school, meaning lessons are taught in the payol of an old gentleman's house. The man is stern, abusive, and irritated by the mere presence of his students. He only cares for money he gets for teaching them and gift to parents send. That is when he is most obliging to the boys. Raju does learn enough to qualify for the first standard in board high school. He can read and do some multiplication. The old master is actually quite proud of Raju and two other boys for making it that far. So back in the present, Velan comes before Raju, brimming with excitement. He declares there has been a miracle. His sister has decided to comply with everything they ask of her. Her marriage is soon and the household is happy and light. Raju asks if he is moving quickly before the girl changes her mind, and Velan is impressed with Raju's insight. Raju doesn't want every single thing he says to be considered genius, so he says sharply that it is ordinary guess. Raju's own smartness is beginning to unsettle him. Velan invites him to the wedding, but he does not go. This does not save him though, for Velam brings the girl and new husband to Raju. The girl says authoritatively that Raju has to only look at you and you are changed. Raju's circle gradually widens. More and more people arrive. Raju says nothing. They sit quietly and demurely. Raju is uncomfortable. He has the day off to himself. But at night, the villagers are there. One night, he actually hides from them and he hears them concernedly wondering if he has gone away. He hears their voices trail away. After they leave, Raju fights the food and they left and is grateful for it. He hopes villain and the others will never think he is too good for good food. The next morning, Raju considers his situation. Should he go back to Malgudi? He cannot work out in the real world. How else will get food? He decides he must stay here. That evening, Raju assumes his pose of beatitude. He has decided to look as brilliant and radiant as he can and not hold back. He even feels a certain excitement as he anticipates the villagers' arrival. However, there is no sight of anyone. His fears return. He wishes he could go search for Velan, but that is undignified. He spots a boy grazing sheep on the opposite bank and calls him over. He announces he is the new priest of this temple and will give him a plantain. The boy explains that he does not come here usually because of the crocodiles, but that his uncle asked him to order to see if the holy man was there. Raju gives him the plantain and tells him to tell his uncle the man is back. It is about chapter 2. In chapter 3, the station building is finally ready. It seems as if Raju, whose words is neatly divided into one side of the railroad and the other. The building is decorated and people gather to celebrate. Police guards. The platform has people flocked around. Several important people give speeches. Raju's father's shop has record sales that day. Over time, the trains bring more prosperity to Raju's father, who buys a horse and carriage. Raju's mother is skeptical about all of this and nags father incessantly. As they become the talk out. She has to wait. Whenever his father is not using a horse, she berates him. His father seems to be aggressive lately and seriously begins to think about getting the jars. A blacksmith proposes to rent out the horse, but the horse offers Raju's father another deal. Let him play with use in the market. This works out well for a few days, but the groom is pending business and begs of remission. It seems he has misappropriated his funds, and the starts to complain that the horse is getting too skinny. The man offers to buy the horse and carry it. Raju's father, exhausted, agrees. They are all glad to be rid of it. Raju's father is given the privilege of running a shop at the railway station. It is so spacious that when his father fills it the articles from the workshop, it looks empty. The station master comes by, and Raju's father is very deferential to him. The man orders Raju's father to fill up more, and Raju's father, seeing the station master as godlike figure, agrees with alacrity. He purchases more goods and fills the shop. Raju is put in charge of the smaller shop. He does not know what to do about all the old people who hang around there, whom his father used to cut. And over time, his father ends up back to the shop, and Raju works at the new shop. Raju's schooling drop off unbrusquely. In chapter 4, everyone in the village is pleased the holy man is back at his post, and they arrive in a class. Raju sees boys and asks what they are studying. So they say nothing, and an elder says they cannot send their boys to school as they do in town because they have to graze cattle. Raju asserts that boys must read, so perhaps they can gather here in the evenings and learn there. The next day, a timid man arrives, but it is Raju who is nervous. At first, many latent fears of teachers rise back up in him. Raju is not very clear-headed honestly and asks the teachers a few questions. The teacher finally asked if Raju had said something about educating the boys here. Raju replies that if he needs a place, he can have it. The teacher demurs, but suddenly Raju's authoritative and says it is their duty to make everyone happy and wise. The teacher is struck by Raju's magnanimity and goes back to the village a changed man. He returned with about a dozen boys. He asked Raju to speak to them, and Raju does marveling at how wise he sounds as he speaks to goodliness and cleanliness and the epics. Years ago, Raju had always read a lot during his shopping days. Sometimes the school boys left bookie there. His father died suddenly during the rainy part of the year. Raju's father, who is working in the hut shop in the railway station, was died suddenly during the rainy part of the year. His mother adjusted to being a widow. She had enough to live on. Raju closed down the hut shop and worked full time as a station shop. He began stocking newspapers, magazines, and books and enjoyed talking with people, students often gathered there. Everyone is impatient to return in the evenings to the holy man's place. The children extol the merits of what they heard. Raju feels like an actor as the people circle around him in the pillared hall. He tells the teacher to take the boys to a corner to read and learn, and that he must speak to the elder. He is concerned through because he does not know what to speak of. The only thing he can speak with authority on is jail. So and its benefits, such as being mistaken for a saint. He wishes he could just call them fools, and tell them to leave him alone with his food. Finally, Raju says he will speak to them all another day and that they ought to spend their time thinking about their thoughts and actions from the day. This confuses some of them, especially as they are just cattle drivers and not philosophers. Raju says simply that if they do it, they will know why, and marvelous to himself that being a saint seems to be merely saying petty things. He fixed 3 men and says they must come back tomorrow and repeat 6 words they said. The next day, Raju beats a soft and chants a holy song. Others join in and the ancient ceiling echoes with their voices. Some people have brought pictures of goods. Gods and women began to decorate the space. Raju realizes his spiritual status, so will go here if he grows a beard and long hair. By the time he gets this hair, his prestige has grown behind his wildest dreams. His gatherings overflow into the corridor and in the river's edge. Raju doesn't know names except villains, but the people do not care. They bring him sick children, quarrels, and concerns. He barely has a private anymore and feels the strain. He likes when he can a few minutes. So it is about the discussing of chapter 1 to 4. Next, we are discussing chapter 5. In chapter 5, Raju remembers how he used to be known as Railway Raju. Everyone asked for him and respected his opinion. He never told them he did not know the answer. He helped people find their way, and in the old man Gafur, a Tangawala, a car owner, and his car to take the tourists where they wanted to go. Raju notes that travelers are enthusiastic and don't mind inconvenience as long as there is something to see. Raju does not understand this but does not care. It is not his place to ask questions. He gets to know the sorts of people who travel in the area. There are scholarly types whom Raju lets do most of the talking. There are more innocent ones whom Raju speaks to freely, making up glorious facts of or exaggerating others. The porter's son now sits in the shop almost all day, while Raju acts as a guide. He comes back to check the money in small exit the shop. Raju says he does not, and that he likes being a guide because people know him, ask for him, and give him food. He also finds talking to people interesting. She is mollified. When a train comes into town, Raju knows exactly where to stand and what to do. Get a tourist to notice him. He has an eye for them and has his classifications for them. There are passionate photographers whom he helps take to the right places. He waits to figure out how much cash the person will have first, though, and then decides how many hours of places he will show him. Raju is quite skilled at making calls in a split second. He sees which tourists engage porters and which took their own bags on their fingers. He sees which ones will want a nice room and which will want one just for sleeping. He carefully scrutinizes those who come to him, knowing they won't be clear-headed right after their journey. He draws out what the person's interests are. After a long time being a guide, Raju knows no two people have the same interest. Taste differs. Some want to see rooms, others hydroelectric plants, others pretty vistas. Some want to get drunk, other want to find poetry in nature. Some want Raju to tell them everything, others want to instruct him to the facts. Raju is polite and to all situations. He makes decent money, especially during special times such as the elephant trapping. Once there is a girl who says all she wants to see is a king cobra dancing to a flute. Her male companion chases her with annoys Raju because he finds the girl very enticing. The man Raju finds him strange but puts him up in the Anand Bhavan Hotel. The man who Raju learns is named Marco. The name Marco sightness for a day and then tells Raju another person is coming. When Raju sees the girl Rosie, Rosie is an important character in the novel. Marco is another important of the novel. Rosie is a dancer. Marco is a wife, husband. He finds her appealing. She is not gorgeous, but she was a lovely figure and dusky skin. One day, Raju takes Marco to the cave and cave carvings he wants to see and tells them he can take her to see the king cobra. Rosie asks her husband and he shoos her away and says he will see her back at the hotel. Gafur and Raju. Gafur was a car owner, car driver. Raju take Rosie to group of in the other side of the river. Raju asks for the snake and a man frauds it in the basket. It rises up and children run up, screaming the return. Rosie calls for the man to play a flute and the complies the Rithas about Rosie is mesmerized by it. When they return, Marco tells Raju the time to bring the car around tomorrow. Raju is privately annoyed. He hates this man and does not like that just orders the car and does not where he is going. The next morning, Gafur and his car are waiting at the hotel. Raju asks where the couple is, and Gafur replies that they said they had be down soon. Something in Gafur's manners bothers Raju. He thinks Gafur must be trying to impress Raju, Rosie as well, and he feels jealous. Goes and knocks. Marco opens the door, fully dusted and ready to go. He exits and closes it. He informs Raju he wants to study the freezes again. Then she cave paintings. Raju calculates how much will cost is rated. He informs Marco they will probably be gone for a whole day and may not get back for the evening. Marco cites that Raju probably has no idea how to deal with when asks what the trouble is. Marco is friendlier than he ever has been and says the fair sex does not lead to peace. Raju can barely restrain himself from the bursting in. Marco comes upstairs and is amazed when Raju says Rosie is coming. Comes downstairs and the three of them join Gafur in the car. Gafur warns them to may have to stay back peak house tonight. Rosie dashes upstairs to get her and husband a change of clothing and seems better between them, but the air. So Peak House is on a cliff in the Mempi Hills and has stunning views of the jungle below, like heaven to those loved with surroundings. And Rosie is in ecstasy with all the plants and flowers. Marco merely seems annoyed. Raju knows his way around the kitchen and serves the food after watching a glorious sunset. Once his hand touches Rosie and he is nearly insensate, but wonders if it is wrong because of Marco. So Rosie asks Mark to join her on the veranda, but he says she wants to be alone. So she asks Raju to join her in the dark. Rosie asks about the various animals. Raju can only think of beauty and wishes he could gush his love for her. But thankfully, He restrains himself because Marco quietly joins them. The next morning, the mood is sore between the two. Marco says he is ready to accuse, and Raju asks about the lady. Marco snaps not to worry about her. Raju wonders that terrible things happen at the night between the two of them. So inside the cave, Marco examines the cave paintings. Raju, bored as the hours pass, finally says he will go back and tells Marco to take the same route home. Marco ignores him and keeps up his actions. Raju assures her that modern India is different and there is no such thing caste. Rosie goes on about how she went to college and then afterward thought. So Raju is surprised at all this, but she defends her choice even though she said Raju and they have made a key to the place. Gafur watches the two of them in the car, but they do not talk or touch. The next day, Raju takes Rosie all over town and shows her with great jest the sights of Malgudi. She is like an excited child and marvelous at everything. Once Gafur warns him that she is married and he waves angrily. Rosie likes the market, hotel and cinema. It's a lovely long day and Raju walks her back to the hotel. At the door, he hesitates and asks feebly if he should leave. Equally feebly, she says yes. On impulse, he gently nudges her aside and enters to follow. This is about chapter 5. In chapter 6, Raju loses count of time after trying to eat the cycles of less seasons. His beard now caresses his chest, his hair is down on his back, and he wears prayer beads. The villagers bring him so many things that he loses interest in getting more. He distributes everything at the end of the day. He asks Villain to stop, but they love gift giving. They also begin calling him Swami. Raju loves the evening rains and how cozy they make the gatherings, but one day notices that the sky never dims with clouds. He asks and Velan says sadly, the rains are not there and crops are beginning there to die. Raju confirming words, but he is disturbed when he goes down to the river to see how he has shrunk, how he has shrunk. So, and one day, Villain tells Raju a buffalo has died. Raju wishes he could say he can do nothing about it. But the brother says that is impossible as they have to get ready for their big battle tonight. Raju, especially that tries to say was not the first tweet of the shopkeeper, so he says that no one should fight. He does not like the idea of so much commotion because what it attracts attention and the police come. He forcefully tells the boy to go tell Velen and the others not to fight and with them. So Raju asks that he will not eat until they are good. The boy barely understands and out of terror of this wild man runs away. So when the boy bursts in, he starts blubbering and the others can barely understand what he's saying. He says, Swami will not eat and say, no fight. The man perk up at this and the boy feels like he should not have said anything about the fight. He lies and says, he told Swami that there is no rain The men laugh and pat it. He remembers he must be clear about the not eating the reasserts this. So the village is dead, the river recedes and dry, an ancient temple. The fight is settled amiably and the people on mess decide to visit the Swami. Raju is waiting for the gifts and food. His mind wanders recipes and his old favorite food and cravings. When he hears his voices, he is relieved but a little puzzled at how large the crowd is. Perhaps he prevented the fight and people are grateful. The people approach, women came to touch his feet, and when he protests, they all say he's not a man but Mahatma. The crowd presses in and will not relate him, so they gaze on him with more interest than normal. They thank him and stumble through their words of thanks. Raju ruminates that perhaps his presence really in the glorious. Finally, Raju returns to Velan and says he must be alert alone tonight and day tomorrow, and Velan must come to tomorrow night alone. So this sounds important. Raju's body aches from sitting. His mind is tormented. He does not know how can survive without food. He wishes he had known this scenario. He made up would apply to him, so he could have tweaked the parameters. So and then if not, his solution is to dip into his extra food. He kept all second meal at night. This will help. So Raju calls him to sit and says he must listen to him. He feels terrible that he will have to shatter the illusion, but it is the only thing he can do. Begins speak, and Raju's voice fills with the night. Villain listens seriously and says nothing there are lines care on his face. It is about the chapter 6. So next to chapter 7. Chapter 7. So Raju become almost like a member of the family. He gives almost all his whole life to near Rosie. Marco keeps his hotel room but stays for over a month at Peak House. Gafur's car is almost permanently engaged, and then Raju used to be nice to the man. Raju tries to avoid gossip and does not like when he and Gafur are alone. Raju is also worried about not looking nice enough for Rosie, so he spends a great deal of money on his appearance. Unfortunately, he is not paying very much attention to the boy running the shop and checks the only for functionally. So his focus on Rosie and Marco means other tourists looking for him go away disappointed. Raju does not like the boy pestering him about taking on these new clients. He doesn't want to think about anything, everything tries him, especially his mother nagging and his dwindling funds. All his mental powers are focused on Rosie. Rosie is a source of concern for Raju now. She is losing her carefree manner and seems to be showing extra consideration for her husband. She tells Raju she cannot simply leave Marco alone and disrespect like him, that sometimes she cries that she is doing him wrong and distance him to lend enchantment so to her now. Rosie eyes finally light up when Raju mentions dance to her. This was what he had first admired in her, and he tells her that to do anything to see her dance, frightening Rosie, beginning to practice for hours a day in the corner of the room. She sets up a statue of Nataraja, god of dances, burns incense, studies the ancient works of art in a large tomes, and focused on how to keep the classical purity in her art. She is incredibly focused on details to spend every moment of the preparing for performances. So when she practices, Raju watches with delight. He doesn't know exactly what it all means, but he is very moved by the composition. So the issue now, starting to Marco to see if she will be able to pursue dance a career. She is nervous because he does not like when she talks dance, but she has modicum of confidence as she and Raju to peak house one day. Marco is very cheerful as he greets the two of them. He speaks excitedly about what he has discovered. So Raju leaves them and return in 2 days, waiting for them come back to cave. After time, Raju decides he will go down to the cave. When a couple is approaching him, Marco doesn't want to talk of him, and Rosie looks morose. All he can with the one day. So until he begins the stay, Marco was happy that until she brought it. And then over time, Raju worries deep. The boy at the shop is not successful. It is losing money. The merchants who supply Raju stop doing so. Eventually, the shop is taken from Raju and given to a new contractor. Raju takes it out on the porter's son, but the boy's father interferes and insults him. The only thing that saves him is mother, who comes to him when he is about to fight back more intensely. She drags her son away. He is immensely gloomy in knowing all of his railway associations are over. So it is about the seventh chapter. Tomorrow we are discussing remaining four chapters and continue this text tomorrow classes. Bye. See you.